Welcome back to the Financial Chronicles channel, where we do not just look at the news, we decode the history behind the headlines. Have you ever felt like the world is spinning out of control? Like the rules of the game have suddenly changed, and nobody knows what happens next? You are not alone. What we are witnessing right now, in the economy, in politics, and in the streets, is not random. It is part of a pattern, a terrifying, yet predictable cycle that has repeated itself for centuries. From the blood-soaked guillotines of Paris in 1789 to the frozen steppes of the Winter Palace in Russia in 1917 and the jungles of Cuba in 1959, history follows a script. And today, we are going to read that script together. Scholars, historians, and macroeconomists have long studied the anatomy of revolution. They have identified a six-stage cycle, a roadmap of destruction and rebirth. And if you overlay this map onto the United States of America today, the conclusion is chilling. America is no longer at the beginning. It is not even in the middle. The data suggests the USA has entered stage 4. But before we tell you what happens in stage 4, and why it is the most dangerous phase of all, we must understand the machine itself. Revolutions are not events. They are processes. They do not explode out of nowhere. They brew, slowly, in the silence of economic despair. Let's go back. Let's look at stage 1. This is the structural rot. In every major revolution, long before the first shot is fired, the society is already dead on the inside. In 18th century France, the Bourbon monarchy looked powerful. Versailles was dripping in gold. The art was beautiful. The armies were feared. But underneath, the financial system was cancerous. The French government had spent decades fighting wars on borrowed money, including funding the American Revolution. Does that sound familiar? A global superpower, overextended, fighting wars abroad while its own people suffer? By the late 1780s, France was bankrupt. The interest payments on the national debt consumed half of the budget. Half. This is the hallmark of stage 1. Unpayable debt and extreme inequality. In stage 1, the elites, the aristocracy, disconnect from reality. They live in a bubble. In Russia, the Romanovs held lavish balls while the peasantry starved. In Cuba, Havana was the playground of American mobsters and wealthy sugar barons, while the rural population lived in dirt floor shacks with no health care. This creates a distinctive psychological split. The haves believe the party will never end. The have-nots begin to believe that the system itself is the enemy. But stage 1 can last for decades. Rot is slow. It takes a long time for a great tree to fall. People will endure immense suffering if they think there is no alternative. So, what pushes a society from rot to revolution? That brings us to stage 2, the trigger and the moderate dream. Usually, it is a financial crisis. In France, it was the price of bread. A bad harvest combined with currency devaluation meant that a loaf of bread cost a week's wages. When men cannot feed their children, they cease to be men and become revolutionaries. But here is the trick that history plays on us. When the revolution begins, it is usually led by moderates. It is full of hope. In the early days of the French Revolution, they didn't want to kill the king. They wanted a constitutional monarchy. They wanted fairness. In Russia, before Lenin took over, there was the February Revolution, which established a provisional government. It was supposed to be democratic. This is the phase of hope. People flood the streets. Flags wave. Statues are toppled. The old regime promises to change. We hear you. Comma, we will reform. Comma, we will print money to fix it. But they cannot fix it. Because the problems are too deep. You cannot fix a debt crisis by printing more debt. You cannot fix a hatred of the elites by shuffling the same elites around. And this is where the cycle turns dark. This is where the hope dies and the nightmare begins. This is where the United States finds itself teetering on the edge of today. Because when the moderates fail, when the reform turns out to be a lie, the public does not go back to sleep. They get angry, radicalized, and they start looking for a different kind of solution. Not a solution of laws, but a solution of force. To understand what comes next, we have to look closely at the mechanism of radicalization. Why does a society go from demanding lower taxes to demanding heads on spikes? The answer lies in the failure of the middle. When the center collapses, the vacuum is filled by the extremes. Let's look at the transition from Stage 3 to Stage 4. In Stage 3, the factions emerge. Society splits into tribes. You are either with us or against us. There is no nuance. In France, it was the Jacobins versus the Girondins. In Russia, the Bolsheviks versus the Mensheviks. In modern America, well, just look at your Twitter feed. Just turn on the news. Two realities. Two sets of facts. Two tribes, looking at each other not as opponents, but as existential threats. The dialogue stops. The shouting begins. And once the shouting stops, the violence is the only language left. As we delve deeper into this anatomy of collapse, we must recognize that money, or specifically the destruction of money, is the fuel for this fire. You cannot separate the guillotine from the assignat, the paper currency of revolutionary France. Let's focus on this transition, because it explains exactly why the moderate phase always fails. In Stage 2, the government tries to appease the angry mob by printing money. In France, the revolutionary government confiscated church lands and issued paper money backed by that land. It seemed like a genius move. Free money for the people. Solvency for the state. But economics has laws that no revolutionary decree can override. They printed too much. Inflation skyrocketed. The price of firewood, candles, and soap doubled, then tripled. The assignat became worthless paper. Does this sound like quantitative easing? Does this sound like stimulus checks and spiraling grocery bills in the 2020s? When the money dies, trust dies. And when trust dies, the moderates, the people saying, let's just be calm, let's vote on this, they look weak. They look incompetent. Worse, they look like accomplices to the old system. Enter Stage 4. The radical turn. This is the stage where the mask falls off. This is the stage where the USA sits today. In this stage, the definition of enemy expands. At first, the enemy was the king, or the czar, or the dictator. But in Stage 4, the enemy becomes your neighbor. The enemy becomes the person who thinks differently than you. In 1793 France, the Jacobins seized power. They were the radicals. They argued that the revolution was being sabotaged from within. Spies are everywhere. Traitors are among us, they screamed. They established the Committee of Public Safety, a lovely name for a terrifying organization. Its job was not safety, its job was purity. This is a key characteristic of Stage 4, the demand for ideological purity. You see this in Russia after 1917. The Bolsheviks began purging not just the monarchists, but the other socialists who weren't radical enough. You see this in Cuba, where Castro's firing squads began eliminating former allies who questioned the direction of the state. Now, look at the United States. We are not seeing mass executions in the streets, not yet. But look at the mechanism. Look at cancel culture. Look at the weaponization of the legal system. Look at the purging of institutions. Whether it is universities, corporate boardrooms, or government agencies, there is a massive push to remove those who do not align with the new orthodoxy. This is the psychological equivalent of the terror. It is soft terror. You don't lose your head. You lose your job. You lose your reputation. You lose your bank account. The goal is the same. Silence the opposition. In Stage 4, the law is no longer a shield to protect the citizen. It is a sword to attack the enemy. We see the erosion of neutral institutions. The FBI, the Department of Justice, the media. In a stable society, these are supposed to be referees. In Stage 4, the referees put on jerseys and start tackling the players. This destroys the legitimacy of the state. And once legitimacy is gone, power becomes raw. It becomes about who has the strength to enforce their will. Let's analyze the counter-revolutionary dynamic of Stage 4. Because for every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. As one side becomes more radical, the other side does not just sit there. They radicalize too. In the US, we see the rise of populism on the right as a direct response to the institutional dominance of the left. This is the friction point. This is where the sparks fly. In Spain, in the 1930s, this polarization led to the Civil War. The left and the right could no longer inhabit the same parliament. They could not even inhabit the same reality. Stage 4 is characterized by chaos. Crime rises. Social norms break down. The cities become dangerous. We see this in the decay of major American metros. San Francisco, Chicago, New York. The breakdown of law and order is a classic symptom. It creates a feeling of anarchy. And human beings, biologically, psychologically, hate anarchy. We fear chaos more than we fear tyranny. This is the crucial insight that explains stage 5. When people are afraid to walk down the street, when they cannot afford food, when they feel their culture is being erased, they stop caring about democracy. They stop caring about free speech. They start screaming for one thing, and one thing only: order. They want the chaos to stop, and they will accept anyone who promises to stop it. This is the setup for the next phase. The moderates have failed. The radicals have created a nightmare. The public is exhausted. They are tired of the protests. They are tired of the politics. They are waiting for the man on the horse. They are waiting for the Napoleon. But before we get to the Napoleon, we must understand the Thermidor. In the French Revolution, Thermidor was the month when the terror ended. The radical leader Robespierre was arrested and executed by his own men. Why? Because the society broke. The intensity of stage 4 cannot be sustained forever. You cannot run a society on 100% adrenaline and hatred indefinitely. Eventually, the pendulum snaps back. But it doesn't snap back to the beginning. It snaps forward into something hard, something rigid. In the U.S. context, we are currently living through the peak of the chaos. The institutional trust is hitting zero. The financial pressure is mounting. The debt bomb is ticking. This soft terror is alienating half the population. This is the darkness before the dawn, or perhaps the darkness before the storm. Because what emerges from stage 4 is not a return to the good old days. The old regime is dead. It's gone. You cannot go back to 1990 or 1950. The only way is through. And what lies on the other side is the consolidation. To fully grasp the magnitude of where we are, we need to look at the cycle of extremism that defines the end of stage 4. This is the moment where the rubber meets the road. Think of the United States right now. The political deadlock is absolute. Congress is paralyzed. The Supreme Court is under attack. The presidency is a lightning rod for hatred, regardless of who sits in the Oval Office. This paralysis is a feature, not a bug, of stage 4. The system is designed for a consensus society, but the consensus has evaporated. When the machinery of government jams, people begin to look for ways to bypass the machine. In Rome, during the fall of the Republic, this is exactly what happened. The Senate became useless, a debating club for rich men who hated each other. So, the generals, Marius, Sulla, Caesar, began to bypass the Senate and appeal directly to the people and to the legions. In modern America, we don't have legions in the same way. But we have executive orders. We have emergency powers. We have the administrative state. Watch closely how power shifts away from the legislative branch, the people's representatives, toward the executive branch. This is the centralization of power. It happens because the crisis demands it. We cannot wait for Congress to vote. We must act now. That is the siren song of stage 5. But we are still in the painful transition of stage 4. Let's look at the cultural aspect of this stage. It's not just politics. It is a war over reality. In the Soviet Union, they rewrote history books constantly. Figures who were heroes yesterday became villains today. Statues were removed. Photos were airbrushed. Does this sound familiar? The tearing down of historical monuments in the U.S., the renaming of schools, the rewriting of classic literature to be sensitive. This is not just political correctness. It is a revolutionary tactic. It is year zero thinking. To build the new world, the old world must be erased. If you control the past, you control the future. But this erasure creates a deep, psychic wound in the population. It creates a sense of rootlessness. And rootless people are easily manipulated. They are desperate for belonging. They will join a mob just to feel safe. Let's look at the financial accelerator again. Because while the culture wars rage, the dollar is dying. This is the silent killer. In every historical example, France, Russia, Weimar Germany, Venezuela, the stage for chaos is accelerated by hyperinflation or currency collapse. Why? Because chaos is expensive. Buying off the population is expensive. Funding wars is expensive. The U.S. national debt is compounding at a rate that is mathematically impossible to sustain. We are seeing the debasement of Rome in real time. They are shaving the silver off the coins, or in our case, adding zeros to the digital ledger. This inflation destroys the middle class. And the middle class is the anchor of stability. When the middle class vanishes, you are left with only two groups: the ultra-rich oligarchs and the desperate proletariat. This is the recipe for authoritarianism. Aristarchs don't want democracy, they want control. The desperate don't want democracy, they want bread. So, where's the exit ramp? Is there a way out of stage 4 that doesn't lead to stage 5? History says, rarely. Once the cycle reaches this velocity, it is very hard to stop. It's like a train with no brakes going downhill. You cannot simply vote your way out of a cultural revolution. You cannot vote your way out of a sovereign debt collapse. However, the speed of the collapse varies. In Russia, it was fast. 1917 was a blur of violence. In Rome, the transition from republic to empire took decades. The US seems to be on the Roman timeline, a slow, grinding decline of institutions, punctuated by sudden shocks. But the feeling, the atmosphere, is undeniable. It is the feeling of waiting for the other shoe to drop. It is the tension in the air at the Thanksgiving dinner table where politics cannot be discussed. It is the anxiety when you look at your savings and wonder what they will be worth in 5 years. This anxiety is the fuel for the strongman. Let's talk about the Thermidorian reaction in more detail. In the French Revolution, after the Reign of Terror, the people were sick of blood. They were sick of the moralizing police. They turned against Robespierre. This reaction is coming for the US. We are already seeing the early signs of it. The pushback against woke culture. The rejection of mainstream media narratives. The red pilling of Silicon Valley. This is the immune system of society trying to fight off the virus of radicalization. But here is the danger. The reaction can be just as violent as the revolution. When the pendulum swings back, it swings hard. It seeks vengeance. And this vengeance paves the way for the consolidation of power into a single set of hands. The people say, we don't care about the rules anymore. Just win. Just defeat them. When winning becomes more important than the rules, the republic is effectively dead. The structure remains, the buildings are there, the titles are there, but the spirit is autocracy. We are standing on the precipice. Stage 4 is the noise. Stage 4 is the fire. But Stage 5 is the silence that comes after. And that silence is often the silence of a prison. We have arrived at the threshold of Stage 5. This is the stage of the strongman, the Caesar, the consolidator. If Stage 4 is the storm, Stage 5 is the new landscape left behind after the hurricane has passed. How does this happen? How does a freedom-loving people voluntarily hand over their liberty? It happens through exhaustion. In 1799, France had endured 10 years of chaos. Monarchs beheaded, currency collapsed, constant war, neighbors informing on neighbors. Then, a young general named Napoleon Bonaparte walked into the room. He didn't promise liberty, equality, fraternity. He promised stability. He promised glory. He promised functioning banks and safe streets. And France, the same France that killed a king to be free, crowned Napoleon an emperor. They cheered for it. Because order is the ultimate luxury when you have lived in chaos. In the Russian timeline, this is the consolidation under Stalin. The revolutionary fervor of Lenin was replaced by the iron, bureaucratic fist of Stalin. The permanent revolution ended, and the Soviet Empire began. So, what does Stage 5 look like for the United States? It probably won't look like a guy on a horse with a sword. History rhymes, it doesn't repeat exactly. In the 21st century, the strongman might be a technocrat, or a populist president with expanded emergency powers, or a fusion of corporate and state power. The key feature of Stage 5 is the centralization of authority. The checks and balances that the Founding Fathers designed, they become obstacles to be removed. And the public, terrified by the economic collapse or the internal conflict of Stage 4, will applaud their removal. We need a strong leader to fix the economy. We need a strong leader to crush the domestic terrorists. The justifications will sound reasonable at the time. In Stage 5, the culture war is decided. One side wins. The other side is suppressed. The media aligns with the state. The internet becomes a controlled environment. The surveillance state, which we have already built, is fully activated. Not to catch foreign terrorists, but to monitor domestic compliance. This is the American empire phase. Not a republic, but an empire. An empire is managed from the top down. The provinces, the states, lose their autonomy. Everything flows from the capital. Economically, Stage 5 usually brings a reset. The old currency, destroyed in Stage 4, is replaced. A new currency is issued. In our modern context, this is almost certainly the CBDC, central bank digital currency. Programmable money. Money that gives the state absolute control over every transaction. You can only buy this much meat. You cannot travel to that zone. Your money expires in 30 days to stimulate the economy. This is the ultimate tool of the Stage 5 consolidator. It solves the chaos of the market by eliminating the market. We see shadows of this already. The calls for misinformation boards, the debanking of political protesters, The normalizing of emergency governance. The pieces are on the board. They are just waiting for the right crisis to move them into checkmate. But is Stage 5 the end? No. History keeps moving. Stage 6 is normalization and decline. But that is a story for the distant future. Right now, we must focus on the transition from 4 to 5. Because that is the transition that will define your life. This is the most dangerous moment because it is the most deceptive. The strongman often appears as a savior. He, or she, fights the battles you want fought. But the price of that victory is your voice. And let's be clear, this isn't just about one political party. Both the left and the right in America are currently drifting toward authoritarian solutions. The right wants to use the state to crush wokeness. The left wants to use the state to crush magism. Both sides have abandoned the classic liberal idea of, I disagree with you, but I will fight to the death for your right to say it. That idea is dead. And its tombstone reads, here lies the First Amendment, victim of Stage 4. So, if the USA is indeed at Stage 4, moving toward Stage 5, what does that mean for the world? When Rome changed from republic to empire, the world shook. When France went to Napoleon, Europe burned for 15 years. The collapse of the American Republic into an American empire will not be quiet. It will reshape global alliances. It will reshape global trade. It will reshape the very concept of the West. We are watching the end of an era. The post-World War II order is over. The end of history was a myth. History is back. And it is hungry. We have traced the arc of revolution, from the subtle rot of inequality, through the hopeful moderate phase, into the terrifying chaos of radicalization where we stand today, and looked ahead to the iron grip of the coming consolidation. The picture I have painted is dark. It is heavy, but it is necessary. Ignoring the storm does not stop the rain from falling. However, knowledge is power. If you know the script, you do not have to be a victim of the play. What can you do? How do you survive, and perhaps even thrive, during a Stage 4 to Stage 5 transition? First, recognize that the old normal is not coming back. Stop waiting for 2019 to return. Stop waiting for prices to go back to normal. Adapt to the new reality. This means becoming anti-fragile. Financially, this means getting out of the system that is collapsing. If the currency is being debased, do not hold your wealth in currency. History shows that during these transitions, hard assets are king. Gold, silver, land, commodities, things that cannot be printed by a politician in a panic. The Roman denarius lost its silver content, but the silver itself survived. Second, build your community. In Stage 4, trust in institutions collapses. The police, the supply chains, the utilities, they become unreliable. You cannot rely on the system to save you. You must rely on your network, your neighbors, your family, your local community. Resilience is local. Third, guard your mind. Stage 4 is a war of information. It is a war of propaganda. The goal is to make you angry, fearful, and compliant. Do not let them. Disconnect from the 24-hour outrage cycle. Focus on what you can control. Focus on your skills, your health, and your spirit. We are living through history. It is scary, yes, but it is also an opportunity. Great fortunes are made during these transitions. Great leaders are forged in these fires. The world is being remade, and you have a role to play in it. The United States is at a crossroads. The Republic is flickering. The Empire is rising. Whether this transition ends in a totalitarian nightmare or a renewed, stronger nation depends, in part, on us. It depends on whether good people stand up or whether they retreat into silence. The cycle of revolution is powerful, but it is not fate. We are not just actors reading a script. We can improvise. We can push back. But we can only do that if we are awake. So, I ask you, look around. Look at the prices. Look at the anger. Look at the laws. Do you see Stage 4? Or do you see something else? This is the Financial Chronicles channel. Our goal is to open your eyes to the machinery of the world. We don't sell fear, we sell clarity. And in a world of chaos, clarity is the most valuable asset of all. We will continue to track this cycle. We will continue to watch the indicators. We will be your guide through the storm. If you found value in this analysis, if this video helped you make sense of the madness, then please, do your part. The algorithm hates the truth, but you can help us spread it. Smash that like button to help us break through the noise. Share this video with a friend who needs to wake up. And if you haven't already, subscribe and hit the notification bell. You do not want to miss what comes next. The cycle is turning. Be ready. Thank you for watching. And until next time, keep your eyes open.